Hello, everybody. I'm Brett Smith, Channel Program Director here at MasterControl. And first, thank you so much for joining us for today's Lunch and Learn, where we will be talking about the latest best practices for investigating and documenting quality deviations. Today, we're incredibly lucky to be joined by Sue Schniepp from Regulatory Compliance Associates. She'll be taking us through all the ins, outs, whys, and hows of investigating quality deviations. After we hear from Susan, we'll welcome in one of my colleagues from MasterControl, Solution Consultant Kat Lewis. She'll be leading a demo of our Quality Excellence solution. It will give you a chance to see our software in action and learn how it can help you maintain those best practices for quality deviation investigations. After that demo, we'll have some time to answer some questions. So if you do have any questions that come up during this presentation, please submit them by clicking on the Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen. We'll answer as many of those as we can at that time. And remember that if you stay tuned for at least 45 minutes of this presentation, you'll qualify for a gift card that can be used in your area. We have a lot of really great information for you today, so staying with us shouldn't be a challenge. Before we get started, let's chat a minute about Regulatory Compliance Associates, truly one of MasterControl's great partners. Their team is widely recognized within the life sciences industry and global regulatory agencies for their ability to help companies successfully resolve complex regulatory challenges. They specialize in services for medical device, pharmaceutical, biologics, combination product, and compounding pharmacy clients. They help companies develop strategies and then execute on those strategies. At MasterControl, we are always thrilled to partner with organizations with such a high level of experience and expertise that mesh perfectly with our mission of helping to deliver life-changing products to more people sooner. And with that, I'm very pleased to welcome Susan from RCA. Susan, take it over.
Thank you, Brett, and thanks to the entire MasterControl team for having us and inviting us to share the platform with you today. We always like to support our partners. So we're going to talk about documenting investigations and deviations today. And the topics that we'd like to cover on the next slide include just some basics. This isn't going to be an in-depth how to investigate. This is going to give you basics on what you need to do to have a complete and thorough investigation and drive yourself to root cause. So the topics that we want to cover are: why do we investigate? When do we investigate? How do we investigate? How do we document our investigation? And then just wrap it up with some helpful hints for that documentation. Next slide. So why do we investigate? Well, it's required by law, and it's in the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act and various sections of 21 CFR. And we're going to go through those in a minute. But in addition to just following the law and being in compliance, if you investigate thoroughly and you come to root cause and you can solve your problems, it's going to save you money. You're going to have a lot less downtime on your lines, a lot less scrap and waste on your manufacturing lines, a lot more people not spending time and their salary and their hours running investigations, but actually running the lines and doing the jobs they need to do. It saves time. It will improve your reputation, both in a regulatory aspect and in a customer aspect. And I believe that if potential customers see that you have your investigations and deviations in control, that it will help generate business. So with that, let's move on to where does it say. I'm not going to read all of this to you. You can go look up, you'll have the citations. But really what I want to point out here is that in the original Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, the method, everything is included. All of the procedures and processes and SOPs that you use, the batch records that you use to release your product must conform with current good manufacturing practices. If they don't, then your product can and is considered adulterated. That is supported in the next slide by language that we see in 21 CFR. This is part 210. And it talks about what the chapter contains. And again, it repeats that everything surrounding your product and your product release is subject to CGMP requirements. And again, if you don't adhere to that, your product can be considered and will be considered adulterated. So failure to comply is the second piece, and that says if you don't comply with what we've laid out in 211, and that's all of 211, for the packaging, manufacturing, holding, labeling, right, you will be subject to regulatory action. And that regulatory action could be in the form of a 483, a warning letter, a consent decree, a number of things together. In the next part, not to leave out, where does it say investigation? Right here, there is a section in 21 CFR that talks about the responsibilities of the quality control unit. And what it also says, being realistic, everybody realizes that things happen when you manufacture a product, especially when humans are concerned. And if that stuff happens, those errors have to be investigated. And there's your language that tells you that. Now, not to leave out any of the device people, because we go to 820, which is part of 21 CFR. And it also establishes for the device manufacturers that you have an obligation to investigate the cause of nonconformities and all activities, but it goes on a little bit further to say all activities required under this section and their results will be thoroughly documented. So you can get the idea that things are progressing here in a documentation wise. You're going to have a lot of documentation to support your investigations. Next slide. And the last we want to say, it's reinforced in 82100, determination of the need for investigation and evaluation, and any event investigation shall be documented. I like to point out the regs and where things are grounded in, because inevitably somebody will ask you, where does it say that in the regulation? And you can respond confidently, it's there, and here are the sections where you can find it. All right, next slide, we're going to go into when do we investigate? Well, pretty much when something occurs that's not supposed to occur. When someone doesn't follow their SOP, when you get a customer complaint from the field, all of these are pushes into when deviations happen on the manufacturing line. All of these are pushes. We have GXP violations, that would be audit 483 observations. It all pushes into your ability or need to investigate based on the regulations. And out of those investigations, you can have CAPA, you can have just a simple correction. You might want to amend a regulatory filing. You might want to change documentation, but all of these pushes can result in a very big investigation, sometimes small investigation, but it drives the need to investigate. Next slide. So again, this just kind of puts into words, when failures occur in products, raw materials, your components. So that's saying, control your supply chain. When complaints come in from the field, regardless of who your customer is, if it's a hospital, if it's a doctor, if it's a pharmacy, when a quality or just a regular consumer, when a quality complaint comes in, you're obligated to investigate. When you see adverse trends in your facility, environmental monitoring, product results that are starting to move trending downward or upward, multiple errors, simple errors are identified. And then there's, of course, audit findings, both internal and external. Next slide. Let's say, how do we investigate? All right. Well, these are some just helpful hints, general considerations. One size does not fit all. So simple errors, require simple documentation. More serious errors or deviations will require broader investigations. The best tool that you can have is the ability to ask questions. How far can this deviation extend? How many products might be affected? How many lines might be affected? Widen your perspective. Don't look for ways to separate things. Look for ways to relate them. If you can do that, you may find a trend that goes on throughout your whole facility, and you very well may solve a huge problem that's going to save a lot of money. So don't try to separate and make this a unique occurrence. See if you can relate it to other similar issues that have happened. Human error is rarely a sufficient root cause, and always verify, never assume. I'd like to touch on human error because, one of the top citations for FDA across the board, whether you're biotech, pharma, or medical devices, they always talk about insufficient investigations or lack of thorough investigations. And one of the reasons they do that is a lot of people attribute the root cause, or they have the root cause as human error. And so what they do is they train, and that's what they do. Let me tell you about a situation I faced when I took over a company quality unit, and I was familiarizing myself with the operations. And so I looked, of course, naturally, I picked up the investigations and the deviations files, and I started to notice that there was one operator, Jose, who worked second shift, who was in 3 months had 30 deviations for the exact same mistake, which was he forgot to sign the batch record in a certain portion while he was running the product and the operator. And I thought, well, that's really kind of odd. So I called in and I noticed that all that they did was say it was human error, and they retrained Jose. So I called in my staff and I said, is Jose the right person for this job? It seems to me he has a problem with documentation, and that's not a good attribute for a operator. Now, oh no, Jose's great. He's one of the best. He cares so much about the product. He's so diligent. He's so good. I said, yeah, but he keeps making this mistake. So there's something wrong. What is it? Oh, no. Jose is great. We just retrain him. It's okay. It's some glitch he has about this batch record. So I went to the second shift to interview Jose. And I said, what's going on? And he said, in order for me to sign the batch record at the time they want me to sign it, I have to leave the sterile core, degown, leave the area, sign the batch record, get back into dress, gown up again, go into the sterile core, and continue making the product. And I said, well, that seems kind of odd. He said, yeah, because nobody's watching the product when I do that. So basically, the error behind the human error was a poorly designed batch record. The question you really need to ask yourself once we solve that problem, and Jose was fine, what were the other people who were doing this same procedure doing? How did that impact the product? Because either they were having a data error or data falsification issue, or they were leaving the product unattended for a certain period of time. So now you've opened up a whole big data integrity issue that you didn't need to have if you had stopped and talked to Jose and not attributed it to human error. Next slide, please. Okay, so how do we investigate? Again, you want to get as much data about the incident as possible, and you want to do a historical evaluation. So you're going to have to go back and look at other investigations and deviations that you have done and see if there's any correlation. So have we seen this before? These are just some questions you might want to ask yourself. Have we seen this on this line or on other lines? Have we seen these operators do this? Jose is a great example. He kept repeating the same thing. That indicated a problem. What were the process and methods used? You want to take a look at that. Your materials, laboratory analysis, impact to the material or product. So all of this are things, this is stuff you have to ask yourself, and it's stuff you have to document. Next. Okay, so how do we document? Well, you're going to use a lot of different things. in your quality management system to document, and it's your document control, and it's your standard operating procedures, change control, your investigation management, your audit tracking. All of these are places that you're going to look and or document as you solve the problems that you have. Now, what I like to kind of point out here is why does this matter? Because if you change an SOP to as a root cause based on a deviation investigation, you may have to change technical documents. You may have to change registration filings based on that change. You don't know, you're changing an SOP. You are going to have to do training on it, right? And all of that, again, is pieces of documentation that have to come together. Now, thorough investigations and coming to root cause is very, very important, because I had a situation where that did not happen. And it resulted in the loss of $27 million worth of product because the investigation was not thorough. We had discolored vials coming out of the lyophilizer, and everybody tried to blame the vial manufacturer. That's another clue for you. Don't blame somebody else. Assume that you're the cause of the mistake, so you can eliminate yourself before you start going after your suppliers or other people in your supply chain. And then it went away, mysteriously went away. And I said, okay, what did we learn? Where did we look at? And we had the vial analyzed, and there was copper in the vial that was turning it green. And so, well, where do we have copper? We don't have copper. It's got to be the vial manufacturer. 27 days later and $27 million worth of product, it turned out that the depyrogenation tunnel in the manufacturing line was old, and the copper piping to cool it down was above the line, and the HEPA filters, there was a malfunction in the cooling valve, and so nothing was cooling, and all the water from the copper piping was dripping down on the HEPAs, and they're only taking so much water before they need to breach, and then they were doing their jobs, and they would breach this copper water into the vials that were being depyrogenated. But because nobody bothered to look at the tunnel, nobody bothered to pull open the doors, and nobody bothered to confirm, I was simply told, oh, no, there's no copper. Nobody verified that by really looking into it. What happened was we lost $27 million worth of product. You don't want to make that mistake. So be as thorough as you can and use tools that you need. Ishikawa fishbone diagram, the 5 whys, whatever it is you need to do to get the job done and have a thorough investigation. Next slide. So here's our helpful hints. Just identify what happened. When did it happen? Take all of this information down. Make sure you're documenting it in all your document control systems. Next slide. And you want to keep, as I said, keep things broad. Avoid jumping to conclusions. Don't assume that it wasn't you. Assume it was you. Identify your root causes. That's the big issue. Get to and consider you might have more than one possible root cause. Define your preventive actions and document. Every decision you make, every avenue you plow down, document, and remember the audience. This isn't for you. This is for the investigators. This is for other people 5 years from now to pick up and read and to be able to determine what happened. Next slide. I always like to think that quality is always fashionable. And I think Boy George had it right. And with that, I'm turning it back to you, Brett. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. There you have it. Quality events happen. And as much as we try to mitigate, inevitably, we will still encounter failures in materials, complaints, or audit findings during product development. As RCA explained, documentation is incredibly important. And when you record all of that documentation in a digital system, you're able to easily organize and access that information in the future. Additionally, when you need to make changes to an SOP, training materials, or launch a CAPA, a digital system allows for seamless integration across teams and facilities. And that's exactly what MasterControl can help you do. Simply put, MasterControl delivers the most complete and connected EQMS on the market today. Our solution gives you an integrated set of tools that connect data and processes across your organization, helping you fully connect that culture of quality with the culture of compliance. At the center of MasterControl's solution is quality excellence, and it's built to be the tool for continual quality improvement. It has the tools and features that empower you to digitize and automate the management of quality events, documents, and training across your entire product lifecycle. And it puts all of the tools and documentations you need to ensure quality processes and clarify responsibilities all in one place. We have a lot of great questions. Thank you so much, Kat. Thank you, Susan. So I have questions for both of you, and I'm going to start with one for you, Kat. The first question is, if a field is not required, is there a way to make it required? I see the immediate action tab is required in this demo, but it is not required in our system.
It just depends on what happens. So it's kind of one of those things that happens along the flow with, I probably have some different setup. But unless that scenario is hit, then you can't change the functionality that says this one is or that one's not. But the other thing could be the version. So I am showing you version 2 of our forms. If you're still on version 1, it was never required there.
Okay, perfect. One more question for you, Kat, and then I'll have one for Susan. Regarding investigation and risk assessment module, how are the investigators assigned? Is there a way to select the investigator who has credentials to perform the investigation? And are the investigators linked to their training records? In case of an inspection, I'd like to be able to demonstrate to the investigator has been accredited and trained to perform the investigation.
So you would manage the training through the training module. So in your training module, you can have a training course for that, ensuring, usually we link it up to like a procedure that we have as well, because you always want to have that procedure there on how to do an investigation so that people can go back and refer to it. So the training would be linked there. And so very easily can you see who it was that investigated it. And then because maybe they're going to be in that signature spot, and who is it that put the information in, et cetera. Plus on the root cause investigation, again, you have your team members. And so you can have maybe the area is investigator or something like that. Whatever you put in here for this drop down for this is going to be up to you. And so it is very easy for you. And keep in mind that anybody on any of these steps, your action item people, your signees, I should say, all of that is role-based. So only those people that you put in the role, which then can be associated with that job code, which would then be associated with the training course, and so on and so forth.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Susan, this one's for you. Sue, do you have an example of a simple error that you've seen in your career and how to fix that trend?
Oh, yes, that's a great question, because I don't mean to imply that simple errors can't lead to big problems. They can. But let me give you an example of a simple error that would never lead to a big problem. Could have easily have been solved, but the company wasted resources, as Kat said, chasing it down and tracking it. So it was a date issue. The company had an SOP that said you will sign your date month / day / year. Now I just came in, it was my first day as vice president of quality, and somebody came in and said, oh, you have to sign this validation report, read it and sign it, we need it right away. And so I don't sign my dates that way. I sign them like 15 August 2021. So I'm much more specific. I'm not, month, date. And when I looked back, and then they opened up a deviation on me. Well, we have to track this. You signed it wrong. You've got to be retrained. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. When I looked into the system, I found multiple violations, and they were citing operators for, instead of the / they used the hyphen. It was madness. That is a simple error. And the simple correction is to change your SOP and allow for multiple. I don't care if they write it in rune, as long as it's legible and if people know what the date means. So a lot of simple errors are predicated from poorly written or too restrictive SOPs. And I think that's something, Kat, you have demonstrated. I could find that information and eliminate those poor SOPs and change them from my system, and all would be good, and all the time I would save, not having people tracking down, you wrote your date wrong.
Very good. Thank you, Sue. And then one more question for you, Kat. In the event of an external audit, what fields are visible to the inspectors?
That you give them the option to see. So you can't, if you are going to be showing them, so on all of our forms, there's this print key up here. And so you can print off the full form for everything. In which case, they, of course, are going to see all of it. Now, you also could run reports that have limited information, and some of our forms have an additional key that gives you a summary. So you see some of the information, but not all of the dirty laundry. So it's whichever you choose to give them. I always say less is best when it comes to audits. In fact, I was very much one of those people. Do you know what time it is? Yes. And then you sit there and wait for them to actually ask you for the time. So I would always start with very limited information and then give them what they asked for, but only what they asked for. So for me to hand them an entire deviation, if they didn't ask for it, I just would give them reports.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
I know we weren't able to get to everybody's questions, but I hope that we were able to answer most of your questions. And for those of you that we weren't able to get to your question, we will be reaching out to you in the coming days with an email, and we'll get you the answer to your questions at that time. If you do want any additional clarifications, or if you happen to think of a question at a later time, please feel free to visit rcainc.com, or don't hesitate to simply reach out to your account representative. If you don't know who that is, please simply email info@mastercontrol.com. Again, thank you for attending today's Lunch and Learn. We hope to connect with you again soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.